Today, my guest is Neha Sampat, Esquire. She is the CEO and founder of Gen Lee Belong Lab, where she focuses on building belonging and true inclusion. Through consulting, training, speaking, and writing, she helps organizations create peak performance, inclusive teams by addressing hidden barriers to belonging, such as internalized bias, unconscious bias, distrust in teams, and wellness challenges. She is a nationally sought after expert on inclusive leadership and disrupting, I don't know what disrupting is, but disrupting imposter syndrome. And she runs the top rated Owning Your Value programs to cultivate evidence-based confidence and to nurture authenticity. Neha's insights have been featured in numerous publications. Girl, this list is impressive, including Time Magazine, Thrive Global, ABA Journal, and New India Times. Neha holds BAs in sociology and political science from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. I mixed that up, Urbana-Champaign. Obtained her JD from UC Berkeley School of Law, holds a certificate in graduate applied psychology, and is certified in Hogan assessments. Neha works across industries from Amazon to Pixar and UC Berkeley to Leadership Council on legal diversity. Neha also relishes her role as a mama to her two kiddos. So good. Neha, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, I am so excited to be here. I love conversing with you. So this is truly, honestly, it's just an easy Tuesday morning for me.
Oh, fantastic. So I should tell you all watching that Neha and I live probably 10 doors away from each other. And we were laughing before we hit record about how here we are on Zoom doing this. But I am so lucky to live down the street from this woman. She is fascinating and fun and just all around amazing to be with. So that's why this conversation is going to be an easy Tuesday morning.
Oh my gosh, the feeling is totally mutual. I feel like you're just a joy to be around. And also I learn from you. I mean, that's what's really exciting. I feel like every time we have a conversation, I feel enriched in some way. So
oh my gosh, that's what I think when I walk away from our conversation. So hang in, guys. This is going to be fun. So let's just do this. Let's dive in. So Neha, why don't you tell us what your experience was like when you were living under expectations and shoulds?
I mean, I could answer this question by talking for weeks, possibly months. Because
okay, let's try to keep it to like 20 minutes. Yeah. People have very short attention spans these days.
Velocity is my challenge and my gift. You know, I think that it was subtle. Like I feel like I grew up living under shoulds from, you know, the earliest I can remember. Yeah. And then I'm the child of immigrants from South Asia. So I'm an American of South Asian descent. I was born in the US, and I grew up for the most part in what was then a pretty white and pretty racist suburb of Chicago. And so I felt like an outsider a lot. And I was actually made to feel like an outsider a lot. I was excluded a lot. I was on the receiving end. Our family was on the receiving end of racial bullying and intimidation a lot. And so I learned, as I think a number of immigrant families, brown immigrant families in particular, learn, like, how to lie low. You know, how do you kind of try to assimilate? How do you try to not glorify the parts of you that might be different and unique? Yeah. And then you add to that the gender layer to that, and the expectations of me as a little girl, and then into a woman about, you know, how to behave and what's allowed and how to kind of play by the rules. So I think it was just what happened. And I don't think I think it grew in different ways. I think that when I became a lawyer, the law is a very constraining, traditional, and by traditional, I mean, like, honestly, white male dominated profession with these unwritten rules. And that really made me feel like I was walking a minefield a lot of the time, right? Like I didn't know when I was going to trip up over a rule that I didn't even know was a rule, and all of a sudden found myself like obliterated. So I think that once I entered the profession, I became even more kind of operating by shoulds, you know, like, oh, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? And it just grew until I reached a point around the time I turned 40, I was hitting that big decade age-wise. I was hitting a decade at my last job. I had been at that job for 10 years, right around that same time. I had just had my second child. So I had two very small children at home. And I found myself like staying up late at night, worrying about what this colleague was going to think. Like I was finding myself
Yeah.
frustrated by some work stuff. And I was telling my husband, I'm like, this person did that. And he's like, well, why don't you say something? And I'm like, oh my gosh, but if I say something, then so and so won't like that and won't like me and this and that. And he was like, you're worrying too much about what other people think about you. And so that for me was a big watershed moment where all this kind of subtle growing of the shoulds, bam, I realized, look at where I am. Look at what I've become. Like I'm someone who cares way too much about what other people think to the extent that I can't even figure out what I think about something. And I
Oh,
think,
that's, hold on. You can't even figure out what you think about something. I think
yeah,
that's a pause button for a minute. So I want to just go back a little bit. So from a very early age, if I understood what you were saying correctly, it sounds like within your family, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, there were expectations on what was appropriate and what you should be doing. So there was that layer, or was that not a family piece?
I think there's always a family piece to it, but I think for me, it was more about what happened outside of the home.
So the pressures or the influences were more about, because what I thought I heard you say was kind of that family plus, but it was really more about
It
what
was
was
both.
coming in.
It was family plus, but it was definitely more the trying to fit in
Yeah.
the greater peer group
Yeah.
and feeling like I had to cut off parts of myself to fit in and doing that, successfully doing that, like altering who I was whenever I could alter it in a way to give people what they wanted so I could feel like I was accepted and fit in. So I think that and the rejection that came from outside the home, I think
Yeah.
was more powerful as far as, you know, teaching me, teaching me the bad lesson of, you know, this is what you should do. This is how you should behave. And so I think there was some of it with the family, but my parents were pretty bold. They were pretty like, you know what, like invest in your education, you
Yeah.
know, speak your truth, be an independent woman. So they really empowered me in a lot of ways, but certainly there were cultural aspects, both coming from American culture and coming from my mother culture, my Indian culture, surrounding gender and all that sort of stuff. But in my family, it was a little less, I think. It was more the external piece that I think impacted me, wounded my heart in a way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Wow.
that makes sense. It makes, and so you use the phrase sort of cut, I believe you use this phrase sort of cutting off parts of yourself. And the word that keeps coming to mind for me as I'm listening is for you to be safe. So for
Oh
you
yeah.
to be safe in this environment, you had to let go of certain things. And so there was this hiding and not speaking up. And I can imagine that was all through your education. And you jumped to the law school and then into being a lawyer, but there was a lot of time in between there too. So this was really honed and solidified for you. And it wasn't until you had this conversation with your husband that you really saw it. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I no, I think that I saw it as an adult when I had that conversation with my husband, but there were ways. I was not a meek person when I was in high school. Like I definitely had a rebellious spirit, and if
Oh,
people expected something of me, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give you something different just to show you
I
that,
love that.
yeah, just to show you that you shouldn't have expected that of me. So there was that spirit in me, but I think that once I got into the profession, the legal profession, I again found myself, it was almost like going back to how I felt when I was like in junior high or when I was younger, where I
Yeah.
felt like there's all these unwritten rules and I don't know what they are. And I
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
shifted back in a way
Yeah.
towards quieting that voice. So I had to reconnect with when I kind of realized when I had that conversation with my husband, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about what other people might say or think that I've actually forgotten what I could say or think. I've lost my voice essentially.
Hmm.
I had to remember that there was a voice there, right? So I was able to think back to like that 17-year-old version of myself that was kind of like, a little bit of like F you world,
Yes.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, she's there. That lady's there in here. I just gotta like find her because she hasn't been audible for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And it's time for her to come out. in this woman.
So how would you say, and if you don't know exactly, because I'm sure there's no one magic bullet that shifted this for you, but
Yeah.
what would you say was the process for you of allowing her to come forward? Because you use the word minefield in the legal profession, and I think I get it, and I hope other people can get that visual too, of like, you're very carefully stepping around to not blow something up. And the stakes in your career, particularly early in your
Yeah.
career, are so high. And I think that can be why it's so important and why we shrink so much. So what happened for you? How did you let her come, allow her, that was the word I was looking
Yeah.
for, allow her to start showing up again? Do you know?
Yeah, I do know. I think therapy, I mean, I'm a huge
Yeah,
proponent of therapy. I mean,
me too.
therapy really helped me find that voice inside myself and practice amplifying it. The other thing that was probably the greatest gift I ever gave myself was starting my own business. So when I started my own business, when I started Gen Lead Belong Lab, I left a very social, really fun and exciting work culture to sit in my home office that you see before you today and be around a lot of quiet, and I
Yeah,
was at that point, I knew that I've got this challenge, that I've lost that voice. It's hard for me to even hear that voice within myself. So I was very intentional to not partner with people. Like a lot of entrepreneurs will partner up right away, or, that's just part of how you grow your business is strategic partnerships. And I'm like, I will take the longer, slower route by not partnering, because I knew that once I partnered, I would again, like, listen more, follow that person's lead, listen to that
yeah,
person's voice more. And
yeah,
I would let that voice hamper my own voice, I guess.
yeah, that
So
makes
it
sense.
was really intentional. I'm like, I'm not going to partner. I'm just going to like be by myself for a while. So the only voice I hear that tells me, what do I want to do with this business? What's important to me in my life? How am I going to do it? That's all truly, truly me. And it was the greatest gift I gave myself, because
Mm.
it really took me silencing the voices around me by holding myself up, like, and, being by myself to really hear that voice inside me and practice amplifying it. And then once I got really good at speaking my voice loudly, then it was like, okay, now it's okay for me to partner because I figured out how to do this.
Yeah.
But that was a really great thing that I think when I started the business, I didn't do it for that purpose exactly. But it ended up being probably the biggest payoff for me was doing that. And then I really tapped into my writing. I started to tell my stories. So I remember I wrote a personal essay really early on after I started the business about my experience growing up brown in what was then, like I said, a pretty white town suburb of Chicago. And it was a deeply personal story that, you know, I was relaying experiences that were painful.
Mm.
And I started to put that voice on paper, so to speak. And then not only that, but take the next step and put that out into the world. And so I think that was really important for me, because what I learned from that, and it's a learning that I keep relearning, I keep having to remember and remind myself that the thing that might be the hardest to say, because you feel like no one's going to understand you and you're the only one and you're going to be judged for it,
Hmm.
that's exactly what you need to say. That is
Yeah.
exactly what needs to be heard in this world. And putting that first essay out there really taught me that, because I put it out there and then I got all these like random people were like messaging me talking about how they were in tears reading it and how it totally resonated to them. And it expressed something that was in them that up until that moment had felt unexpressed and bottled up, and all of a sudden was free. And wow, I mean, that was powerful, because here I was carrying that, thinking I'm the only one,
Yeah.
and feeling some shame around it.
Yes.
And then,
Yes.
bam, it's out in the world and it's glory. It's not shame, it's glory.
Isn't that so interesting how we do that to ourselves, that we are convinced that we are the only one. And so we need to hide that. And yet, all over the place, as you found out,
Yeah.
there are people who feel that way. But it took your bravery. It sounds like it was very healing for you to write this story. So it took your bravery and then it connected with all those people. And then so you were just reinforce like, oh, wait, I am not the only one. You might not have thought at that point that you were the only one, but it just reaffirms that. And then you helped those people. So you healed yourself and you were helping those people connect with something they didn't realize was missing either. I love that. Is that out there somewhere that we could link to?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, send me the link to that and we'll put it up, because I would love to read that. And I would imagine anyone watching this is like, I want to, what's that all about? I want to read about that.
For sure.
But I love what you were saying about how you needed to quiet the voices around you so you could hear your own. And the reason I want to stop and point that out is for anyone who's watching, I don't think what Neha is saying is that you have to quit your job and go work in the office by yourself. It's a great way to do it, as it worked for her. But
that's what it took for me. But yes, that's not always
maybe right. But maybe that's the lesson, is creating quiet time for yourself and being intentional about tapping into that voice inside of you, because we all have it. And whatever the circumstances are for people, there have been ways that those voices get dampened down. Like your story was very unique. And I wonder if other people can relate to just that experience of that voice being suppressed. And this piece, I loved what you said, you were very intentional about it. And so maybe that's a takeaway as well, just getting intentional about creating space to kind of close the door on other people's opinions and start finding, maybe you didn't, other people watching didn't have a rebellious teenager, but there's a voice in there that just might need to be tapped into. So I love that you shared that. And kudos to you for not taking the easy route. Like you said, I could have partnered, I could have grown my business early, but I love that you chose the slow burn.
Yeah, totally.
That's fabulous.
A beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah. So
yeah, I totally agree. I think that you're right. I think there are ways to do it, that don't require you to start your own business, but it's this idea, like we're acculturated, especially as women in our culture, to think that we need feedback on everything. And it's like, I'm sorry, but like, no, maybe you don't need feedback. Like the problem with feedback is sometimes it's wrong for you. I mean, that's a big learning I've had in my life, is that I had people tell me, like really well-meaning, brilliant people that I consider mentors, people to whom I look up and still seek advice from, advise me against doing the work I do now, because they're like, it's too hard to sell, Neha. It's really hard to sell that. And I'm so glad that I listened to that feedback, but then was like, you know what, that's what that person thinks for their life. And I'm a different person. And I actually think I'm onto something, and I'm going to just trust myself first. And it ended up being the right thing to do. I was able to build a business on what I really wanted to build a business on. And it was such a great lesson for me that, again, I keep hearkening back to that. It's great to seek out advice from mentors, from friends, but you are your own mentor too, right? You are your own friend too. And creativity is often the one idea that everyone else thinks is never going to work. And we're just waiting for the right person to actually implement it, and then it will work. So that's been a big learning for me too. And I think, when you're talking about creating space, even if you're not like running your own business, can sit quietly in your home office like I was able to for a few years, hold up. I think creating space is even about sometimes not asking for input on everything.
Oh, I think that's huge.
Until you figured out what you want to do and you're committed to it, and then just do it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. What you said about how we are, I think you used the word acculturated. Is that what I heard you say? To this idea that we need everybody else's opinions. This is such an important point. And I see it in myself too. I want to ask 57 other people but truthfully, I will ask the 57 other people and I'll still do what I want to do. Because I ask for feedback, and then I realize this is a lesson that I've been learning. Don't ask for feedback if you don't want it.
That's right.
Don't ask. I really want to do what I want to do, sort of like you when I took this leap as well. I don't need other people to affirm it. I love that we're having this conversation because I'm having this aha moment myself. Like, oh, that's what I do. You're right. And the piece about trusting ourselves is so important, because nobody knows what's right for you more than you do.
Oh, yes.
And how many times have we chased our tails with an idea, but then nobody supported it, or, for whatever reasons. Oh, I love that so much. So Neha, what does life look like now? Like, I want to be clear to everybody watching, this already, but the should still show up, right? It still shows up in your life, but how do you handle it differently now, say, than you did, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah. So I think there are the healthy shoulds, like the shoulds that serve me. Like I should actually pay my bills. I should open my mail. Right? Like even though I'm dreading it and it
Yes.
makes me feel crappy when I think about how I should do it and I should and I
Mhm.
haven't, but I got to do it. So
Yes.
those shoulds I've learned what that looks like for me today is I'm a work in progress on this. I have a lot of work to do still on
Aren't
this.
we all?
Trying
Aren't
to
nobody's like nobody's perfect. Nobody's at the destination. There is no
oh,
destination.
it's a lifetime journey. But I try to think about those shoulds, transforming them as quickly as I can into action. So how can I
Mm,
stop being like, I should open the mail sitting in that basket in our front room, to like, I don't want to be shoulding about it for like
yes.
weeks. Like I just need to like freaking go open the stinking mail, like
Yes.
activate, activate, activate. So the good shoulds, like I should really go out for a walk today. Like how quickly can I just change that into action so it's no longer a should? Because there's the weight of should. Like I feel good
Absolutely.
is weighing me down, is making me feel crappy about myself, making me feel less than. So I want to get that burden off my back. And then the unhealthy shoulds, like this truly unhealthy ones that are like the ones like you were kind of alluding to that make you feel small, like this idea of stay small, don't speak up,
Yeah.
the gender, the race-based ones, like, this is how you should be if you want to be successful in this career. I mean, I even think about it when it comes to public speaking. That's a huge part of what I do for my work now. And um, I used to be really attuned to what I thought I should do to be an effective public speaker. And
Mhm.
now what I have done is I'm like, that's bad should. That's trying to fit me into a mold that was not made
Yes.
for me and not made
Yes.
by me. And that's a should that's making me cut off parts of myself to try to fit in. That's a box checking should.
Yeah.
And that's got to go. So whenever I start to feel that way, that sort of should, I'm like, that's that BS should. That's got to go. And instead, I need to look at who I am and look at how I am perfect the way I am for
Yes.
whatever it is I want to do, right? Like, what do I uniquely bring to a situation? So instead of feeling less than because I don't fit the mold, how am I actually more than because I make my own mold? So that's,
Oh, yes. Yeah. And it goes back to what you were saying about trusting yourself.
yeah.
That's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of doing what you think you should to appeal to whatever group or organization, just show up and be yourself. And that's going to be a million times better when you show up in your authenticity
Oh,
instead of the shoulding, let me fit into this little narrow thing. It'll resonate more with the audience. And if it doesn't, that's okay.
oh my gosh. That was a huge learning for me that that's okay. As someone who grew up, I was very much a people pleaser. I mean, that is what was the driving force, right? I
Yes.
definitely connected over that. And um, it's been so liberating for me to really own that I'm not here to make everyone happy. I'm not going to make everyone happy.
Oh,
And you know what? There's a lot of joy in actually pissing people off. I will be
yeah.
honest with you. Like, especially when it comes to speaking truth to power, which is what is really important to me. Like, how do we stand up for what's right? How do we stand up? How do we create a new mold of what it means to be, for example, a woman? How do I make it such that when my daughter grows up, she can own her expertise publicly without someone thinking that she's arrogant, which is what
Yes.
happens to women, right? And so
Yes.
I'm trying to help create space for all of us to be our authentic selves and not make ourselves small, be our big, amazing, awesome selves. But that motivates me a lot too, thinking about it's not just for me, it's for what sort of future are we going to leave the kids that come after us.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I can't motivate for myself, which is it happens,
Sure.
then I have to be like, okay, am I going to speak truth to power here, even though it might harm me in the short term? But is it the right thing to do for the long term because of the change I want to make societally? And that can be a really great motivating force too. But it really does mean pissing off people. I mean, I know that there are people that don't like the way I do what I do. And what I've realized is that's always going to be the case, no
Yep.
matter how hard I try. Because I used to try. I used to bend over
Yep.
backwards. Like I remember I would do evals at the end of every training I did. And, there might be a few every once in a while that were like negative, and I'd be just so haunted by those.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my God,
Those stand out. The
that's what
600 positive ones don't matter when there's two bad
exactly.
ones.
I'm like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, what am I going to, and I'd be like, what am I going to do next time? And I'd try to like change my presentation to try to respond to that feedback. And at some point I'm like, this is ridiculous. No matter what I do, there's still going to be like those two randos who just don't get me.
Yeah.
Fine. And then the other thing I realized is sometimes when you speak truth to power, you're going to, upset some people, but you're going to fire up a lot of people. So your
Right.
impact can be even greater for those that you positively impact. And so that weighs out, kind of balances out in a different way for me. So that's what's changed a lot. And in a lot of ways, now that I don't respond to those negative shoulds, it's freed me up to be more bold. And that is much more in alignment with my values.
You're lighting up as you're describing this. No, you really are. You're like,
fun.
I love this so much. I think you just broke some old beliefs for people about how you should show up. And if you, what am I trying to say? I'm thinking about the woman who's really buried under those shoulds, who can see you right now and all the positive impact by you not following those. So I really want that to be a take home. I could talk to you. Actually, I was thinking we should do a part 2, maybe. I don't know, but I'm having such a good time.
To chat with you, Jennifer.
Me too. But I really think those are some big take homes here, is that when you don't respond to the shoulds, there is this power that comes from it, and it can ripple out to other people. So that's important. And then the other thing I wanted to walk back to, and then probably we should wrap this up. Back to those, like, the healthy shoulds. When you were talking about like paying your bills, I was thinking about like exercise and eating right. But I love what you said about how when you don't take care of them, how they like sit on your back, they were a weight on you, and all the energy drain. And so I think that's the other side of this coin you were talking about that I think is important to emphasize, that instead of sitting with that, I should do for the things that are important and good for us, activating, I think is the word you used, so that you're not wasting all this energy thinking about, oh man, okay, the mail in the basket, for me right now, my spin bike is sitting upstairs gathering dust, like, just do what we know is good for us so we can let go of those, so that we have the energy to do this, where we show up and be bold and kind of push the people pleaser aside when she wants to come in.
Oh, that's like wisdom. I mean, I'm like going to be chewing on that for a while, because I hadn't even thought about the energy part of it. And I think you're totally, I mean, that resonates with me. Let me put it that way. And I hadn't really thought about that. I thought about the burden and the weight of it, but I just didn't think about how much energy goes into that. And especially in the time like we're in right now, and still in the pandemic, like, no, we don't have energy. We do not have spare energy.
Right. We don't. We absolutely don't. Oh, I'm so glad that clicked with you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I had a mentor who used to call it energy leaks. Like, where are you leaking energy? So awesome. Okay, Neha, is there anything I didn't ask you? Any last bit you want to share?
Well, I'd love to share how the work I do connects with.
Please.
Stopping with the bad shoulds.
Yes, please share with us.
So what we do is we help organizations create cultures of belonging into which each person can bring more of their true and best self. So we work with companies, nonprofits. I'm a lawyer by training, so I work with a lot of law firms to really help them create that space for all of us to bring those parts of ourselves we might have felt like we had to cut off in the past to try to fit in, to bring more of those kind of unique perspectives, unique experiences, unique identities, because we know that when we as individuals can bring more of our true selves, we're going to feel a lot more engaged. We're going to be much more creative problem solvers. We're less likely to leave the organization. Our mental health is a lot better. So we work both on the individual side and empowering folks to do that, and on the organizational side. And the big kind of showcase piece of our work really has been the Owning Your Value programs that are all about building evidence-based confidence, disrupting imposter syndrome, that feeling that I'm not cut out for the work I'm doing, combined with this fear of being discovered as a fraud. So we're all about like identifying imposter syndrome and combating it. And the beauty, well, there are many beautiful things about this work, but I think it's completely tied to this idea of stopping with the shoulds, right?
Yeah, I do too. I think that's
it's
what you
about,
teach them.
it is about like finding your voice, building confidence in your own true self, and being bold enough to project that self outward and share that self with your greater community. And so that's really powerful, I think, on an individual level, but I think on a societal level, it's really powerful too, because for me, my journey in busting my own imposter syndrome and finding my voice and speaking my voice unapologetically, it has been about becoming a better ally and advocate, right? Like it has
Yeah.
been about raising my voice in support of what I believe is right, even when it causes some discomfort. And, you know, I kind of jokingly said how it's kind of fun to like, you know, piss people off, but it's more about like a joy in not being scared of the outcome, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm going to put my voice out there, come what may.
Mhm.
And I recognize I carry a lot of privilege that allows me to do that. Like you raised the point that early on in people's careers, it's different. There's a lot more at stake. There's
Yeah.
a lot less at stake for me. I run my own business. What's my boss going to do? Fire me?
Yes.
So it's, you know, there's that privilege, there's the racial privilege I carry, there's, you know, I have lots of privilege,
Mhm.
but with that privilege, I do believe comes responsibility to
Exactly.
take more chances because there's less at risk. So I really love connecting the dots between the work I do and helping people build their confidence in themselves, find their true selves, and connecting that with the dot of speaking truth to power and carving out the space for not just me, but for all of us to be ourselves. So that's really exciting for me. And I wanted to share that because that's what it's about, owning our value, owning who
Yeah.
we are. And, you know, some people will take it, some people will be inspired by it, and some people will leave it. Fine.
Yep. You can only put it out there. You can't control how it's received, which is a should. That's a people pleaser when we try to
Yeah,
control how
totally.
it's received.
Totally.
So this is so beautiful, Neha. Thank you for sharing about the work that you do. I can imagine people might be interested in learning more about you and perhaps following you. So can you share where people can get in touch with you, website, social, whatever you want to share?
Yeah, for sure. So I would welcome people to connect with me on social. We're at Belong Lab on Twitter, Facebook, and what am I forgetting? Instagram. If you want the like ranty version of me on Twitter, it's Neha Sampat. That's the rantier version of me. And then honestly, the place I post the most on social is LinkedIn. So folks are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, or if they want to connect with me, they just need to send me a note with the connection saying, you know, that they heard me or saw me on your podcast, just so I know I actually know them. But I'm posting on LinkedIn like a lot. So I'll post things about belonging. I'll post things about imposter syndrome. I just posted today this article about Simone Biles, which actually totally
Oh,
to the work you do, Jennifer, and just how she's unabashedly confident because she's freaking amazing. And she's like doing a lot of work to create space for women to own their value and own their amazingness. So if people are interested in you know, little tidbits like that or little videos, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. And they're welcome to check out our website, www.genlead.co.
Jen Lee, GEN.
GENLEAD.co, not com.co.
Got it. Okay. And I will put all of this in the post as well. So, Neha, this has been my absolute pleasure. It's been so fun. I know people are going to find this valuable, hands down. So, thank you. And thank you to those of you who are watching, joining us. I appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody. And I just feel inspired by you. So, thank you.
Oh,
I
thank you.
can't wait to share it.
This is super fun.
All right. Take care. Bye.